Public IP addresses are essential for enabling communication between resources in a virtual network and the internet. They allow Azure resources to be accessible from outside the virtual network, facilitating services like web hosting, remote access, and more. Understanding how to configure and manage public IP addresses is crucial for any Azure administrator. Public IP addresses are vital for scenarios where resources need to be accessible from the internet. For instance, a web server hosting a public website requires a public IP address to be reachable by users. Similarly, remote management of virtual machines often necessitates a public IP address. Without public IP addresses, these resources would remain isolated within the virtual network. Azure offers two types of public IP addresses: dynamic and static. Dynamic IP addresses can change over time, typically when the associated resource is stopped and started. Static IP addresses, on the other hand, remain constant, providing a reliable endpoint for services that require a consistent IP address. Choosing the right type depends on the specific needs of your application. Dynamic public IP addresses are assigned from a pool of available addresses and can change whenever the associated resource is deallocated and then reallocated. This type is suitable for scenarios where the IP address does not need to remain constant, such as non-critical services or temporary resources. However, it's important to note that the IP address may change, which can affect connectivity. Static public IP addresses remain constant throughout the lifecycle of the resource. This is crucial for applications that require a fixed IP address, such as DNS settings, SSL certificates, or firewall rules. Static IP addresses ensure that the resource is always reachable at the same address, providing stability and reliability for critical services. To create a public IP address in Azure, navigate to the Azure portal, select Create a Resource, and search for Public IP Address. Fill in the required details, such as name, IP version, IPv4 or IPv6, and SKU, basic or standard. Once created, the public IP address can be associated with various Azure resources, such as virtual machines, load balancers, and application gateways. After creating a public IP address, it needs to be associated with an Azure resource. For example, to associate a public IP with a virtual machine, navigate to the VM's networking settings and select the public IP address from the drop-down menu. This association makes the VM accessible from the internet, allowing for remote management and access to hosted services. Managing public IP addresses involves monitoring their usage, ensuring they are correctly associated with resources, and making changes as needed. Azure provides tools like Network Watcher and Azure Monitor to track the performance and health of public IP addresses. Regular audits can help ensure that IP addresses are used efficiently and securely. Public IP addresses expose resources to the internet, making them potential targets for attacks. Implementing security measures such as network security groups, NSGs, Azure Firewall, and DDoS protection is essential to safeguard these resources. Restricting access to only necessary IP ranges and regularly updating security rules can help mitigate risks. Public IP addresses incur costs based on their type: dynamic or static, and SKU, basic or standard. Static IP addresses and standard SKU typically cost more due to their enhanced features and reliability. Monitoring and managing the allocation of public IP addresses can help optimize costs. Deallocating unused IP addresses and choosing the appropriate SKU for your needs are effective cost-saving strategies. Adopting best practices for configuring public IP addresses can enhance security, performance, and cost efficiency. These include using static IP addresses for critical services, implementing robust security measures, regularly auditing IP address usage, and leveraging Azure's monitoring tools. Following these practices ensures that public IP addresses are managed effectively and securely. Troubleshooting issues with public IP addresses involves checking the configuration, ensuring the IP address is correctly associated with the resource, and verifying network security settings. Tools like Azure Network Watcher and diagnostic logs can help identify and resolve connectivity problems. Understanding common issues and their solutions can minimize downtime and maintain service availability. Consider a scenario where a company hosts a web application on Azure. They need a static public IP address for their web server to ensure consistent access for users. By configuring a static public IP address and associating it with the web server, They achieve reliable connectivity. Implementing security measures like NSGs and Azure Firewall further protects the application from potential threats. In another scenario, an organization requires remote management of their virtual machines. By assigning dynamic public IP addresses to non-critical VMs and static IP addresses to critical ones, they balance cost and reliability. Using Azure Bastion for secure remote access and regularly auditing IP address usage ensures efficient and secure management of their virtual infrastructure. The landscape of public IP address management is evolving with advancements in cloud technology. Emerging trends include the adoption of IPv6 for a larger address space, enhanced security features, and automation of IP address management. Staying informed about these trends and integrating them into your Azure environment can provide a competitive edge and ensure future readiness. Configuring and managing public IP addresses is a fundamental skill for Azure administrators. It enables seamless communication between Azure resources and the internet, supports various applications, and ensures secure and efficient operations. By understanding the types, creation process, management practices, and security considerations, administrators can effectively leverage public IP addresses to meet their organizational needs.